This was in general an era where we all thought that we could rediscover the great old formulas, where, whilst gaming might suck a little bit, it was just because nobody with real drive and passion had really gotten back into the game again. And all of this could obviously be fixed. We could recreate all of those old glories. And there were a lot of people eager and ready to promise you just that. One of which, of course, was Ashes of Creation, as the game promised to be a new kind of MMO. One of the players, for the players, and best of all, one fully funded by the players. Ashes of Creation would only be responsible to the people who played it. And the creative director, one of the principal movers and shakers behind the project, Stephen Sheriff, would also go in with his own money to make sure it remained independent, only seeking out other investors very hesitantly. As he said, "I am primarily self-funding the project, but if necessary, I have made some very good friends in my previous business endeavors who are dying to invest." Well, that sounds pretty damn good, but Stephen didn't need to worry about any investors, for the money flowed in rivers to the project. $300,000 in the first hour. Yes, hour. Sharif then, of course, pledged to create the greatest game on the market. And the very next day, $750,000 had been raised, fully funding the project. And anything that was left over, well, he yet again stated, "The project is being funded by myself currently. This is going to be a bigger game content-wise than Crownfall, and our budget and funding reflects that." This was a passion project, and it would continue until it had become the new standard of gaming. It seemed for all the world to be a wildly successful fairy tale story, where passion and love for the game conquers all. Yeah. Unfortunately, like so many old fairy tales, the original Little Red Riding Hood comes to mind, for example, where the wolf simply just eats the girl. This story, too, was going to have a significantly darker ending. The first signs of the impending apocalypse came when the game quite suddenly dropped into early access on Steam mid-December. This was strange because there had previously been buy-in and opt-in programs that promised extensive alphas and betas that would be rolled out in many phases over the years. And here it suddenly was, and it was rough. And would get rougher still. The players were not amused. And the reassurances that the game was still in alpha, under heavy development, and would get frequent updates did nothing to placate the crowds. As a lot of the people who played it pointed out fundamental design decisions that simply did not lead to a very fun gameplay experience at all. Now, a bunch of this will come back to the fact that a game like Ashes of Creation, a player-driven world, etc., and all of that, it sounds very good on paper, but pulling it off well, and not simply making it a second job for the people playing it, is very difficult. And then, all of a sudden, with a big update just on the horizon as well, the promised salvation, or at the very least a step in the right direction, on the 31st of January, creative director Stephen Sheriff, the man who had promised the gamers the world that he would never quit because this was a passion project, he quit. He just left, releasing a last Discord statement saying that he had no choice but to leave due to unethical decisions made by the board, and that several other key developers would leave with him. Well, this sounds like a classic case of greedy investors then, surely, that just wants to make a cash grab game, and the brave and noble creatives resist the only way they can, by leaving, by refusing to lend their name to this desecration of their great vision. But wait, what investors? What board was making these unethical decisions. As of late 2021, after all, this project was self-funded. There were no, quote, greedy corporate overlords in sight, just an honest innovator that respected his players. Speaking of fairy tales, that appeared to have been one of them, as alleged traces of investments into Intrepid Studios, the company behind Ashes of Creation, traces back to 2017, the year of the Kickstarter, and indeed even before the launch of the Kickstarter. And Californian court documents, much later on in 2024, seem to have shown that the investors were suing to be allowed access to the company's financial books, which the company had, for some reason, decided to deny the investors access to. So, not quite as independent a company after all then. If Stephen was willing to lie about this, what else could our creative innovator be misrepresenting, one wonders? And the answer was quickly forthcoming. As late as that day, / early next day, the board issued warn letters. These are 60-day advanced notice letters, literal letters, by the way, and you know it's serious when paper is required. And this is a system, warning letters, that must be issued if a large company of more than 100 employees is planning on either closing entirely or doing mass layoffs. This alone, too, is strange enough. If you just lost your entire directing team, the brains, the passion behind the project, then surely purging the populace, all of the programmers, the designers, the people who knew all of the bits and pieces and how they fit together, would be the last thing you would ever want to do, unless it was the only option. As the reason stated for the warn letters were the company's inability to pay wages. How the fuck could that possibly be? The company suddenly realized it didn't have any money for wages it had been paying for years and years and years? A pretty predictable expense, one would think. And the game had already earned a pretty nice lump sum of money. $3 million Kickstarter aside, they were selling access to the game's alpha for $500 a pop, and a whole load of other cheaper versions offering access to various beta tiers, first and second wave, and so on. The game boasted 40,000 people having bought into this system. And then, of course, the game dropped on Steam without any of these beta systems, by the way, ever being actually gone through, as the game entered early access in an alpha state. And later on, we were told that the game had raised $140 million in total. So what the hell happened? Well, remember that lawsuit I mentioned previously, the one in 2024, where the investors were trying to get access to the company's finances, their books? Oh, well, fraud, allegedly, is what happened. Well, again, so the board alleges. See, firstly, there came a couple of lawsuits against the company itself from the laid-off employees, demanding back wages on the grounds the warn letters were not sent out in time, which is their legal right, incidentally, as they are supposed to be getting 60 days notice before being fired, so alright, fair enough. But then, the board launched a far spicier lawsuit. Filed on February the 9th, they alleged that Stephen Sheriff, the creative director, had engaged in massive fraud against the company and the players, seeking $17+ million in damages, as they claim Stephen had embezzled $17 million through various means, in addition to refusing to pay back shareholder loans, using company money to purchase a property, then selling it and pocketing the money privately, and supposedly also refusing to give the company access to Steam early access sales income, and also holding on to assets for the game and financial records, and having taken multiple large bank loans for which the company was now, of course, responsible for. Better still, information is now coming out suggesting that Stephen and his husband did all of this whilst paying themselves $1 million wage. Supposedly, simply by sweet talking the investors into giving them ever more money. This is starting to sound like the plot of a crime comedy, where two gay, married men go out on the town to wine and dine a bunch of rich investors, selling them the earth, the moon, and the glittering stars above, before blowing it all on private trips, champagne, luxurious dinners with lobsters, and stylish properties. Then, in the third act, finally realizing, oh god, this isn't going to work anymore. We've got to borrow more money to pretend that we've got an income that we can then show to our investors and go, look at all of the money we're earning directly from the bank, claiming a cash flow that didn't even exist, whilst hiding away financial records, burying them in the ground under dead tree trunks or something. Viciously resisting lawsuits in order to have them handed over to their investors, before finally, in the end, the 11th hour, storming off in a dramatic huff, claiming to be the injured party at the hands of the vile, greedy board members, hoping against hope that the universe will somehow take care of the rest. I'm really not sure it will. At the very least, not in Stephen's favor. And regardless of what happens with the lawsuit, having him potentially on the hook for $17+ million and lawyers' fees and various damages, I'm sure, I can't imagine him or anyone associated with him ever working in the games industry ever again. And certainly not on a passion project that requires public funding. I mean, see, Kickstarter is a lot of things. It is a risk, as in essence, what Kickstarter is selling is hopes and dreams, often with precious little, if any, grounding in reality, and you really do have to trust the people making these promises. Trust them a lot, sometimes a whole lot more than they actually deserve, as sometimes they end up being, allegedly, gay con men. And hey, no judgment here. I dumped $1,000 on the Eternal Crusade supporter pack. A game so bad it's become a legend in the 40k community. A game I played for maybe 6 hours, loathing every second of it. I have had my financial nuts, along with my hopes and dreams, shattered upon the anvil of disappointment already. And, well, who knows if I've ever actually learned my lesson from any of that. As it is always damned appealing, isn't it? The promise, a return to the good old days, the MMO you've always wanted, the community you remember, all of the mechanics you've ever dreamt of, and all of it can be yours for only $750,000, spread across a couple million supporters. Ooh. It's almost too good to be true. And I will also say, in defense of Kickstarter here, that this at the moment sounds an awful lot more like a case of Stephen Sheriff either vastly overestimating his own abilities, massively misplanning and mishandling all of the money and the project he was handed, or a simple case of a man given far too much money and being way too easily tempted by it. Only realizing far too late that he'd spent it all. And was now looking into how much a plane trip to Paraguay cost. And hey, I remember looking at Ashes of Creation's Kickstarter as well when it came out and thinking to myself, damn, this does sound like a lot of fun, doesn't it? This could be incredibly cool. Making all of this really a tragedy wrapped inside of a comedy. Reminding everyone that sometimes when something looks too good to be true, ask for more proof. Ask for a lot more proof. And whilst you should absolutely chase your dreams, and if that means supporting that dream monetarily, then go for it, but within reason. And preferably only with people you know you can trust as well. as the only person who comes out of this situation smelling like roses is, well, Steam, actually. As whilst I have seen no official announcement on this, quite a few people are saying that they have been given refunds of Ashes of Singularity long after the usual time, which is within 14 days of purchase and under 2 hours of playtime, by contacting Steam support and explaining that, well, the game studio has closed down in an early access state, and the game studio also promised a month's worth of playtime after the early access period, a promise that now by definition can never actually be delivered upon. Thus, since the actual promised product was never received, you can't claim that it's been 14 days since purchase, nor can you claim 2 hours of playtime because, well, the product physically can't actually arrive. And Steam, as the Chad it is, has apparently granted many of those refunds. So if you're one of the people with Ashes of Creation on your Steam account, and you would rather not be reminded for all eternity about your questionable financial decisions, I would highly recommend submitting a ticket to ask for your money back. And maybe send a little prayer that justice finds whoever was responsible for this abomination of a fuck-up whilst you're at it. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for listening, and exercise caution when things look a little bit too good to be true. Have a good day.